All right, how's the mic? Okay. Hi, I'm Maria. And if you have always wanted to know more about bladder control, you're in luck. Today I will be talking about pee. So I thought I would start with a little local Pittsburgh color with these Andy Warhol paintings, sort of a sprinkling of art history. So we've got the piss paintings by Andy Warhol. He had friends come over, they peed on things, and then he put them in a museum. For this talk, I will be discussing bladder control. I will be making a fair number of puns, which means that urethra are gonna love it. Or you're gonna be pissed by the end. Let's get going. That was another pun, nice catch. When you were peeing today, did you think to yourself, wow, this sure is proof that I have a soul? That is what people in the Middle Ages thought. More on that later. I think that the heart and soul of a good talk, or even the bladder of a good talk, is a good graph. So I'm going to be showing you this graph of some things that matter. On the y-axis here, we have how much something matters in day-to-day life. On the x-axis, we have how much most people think about it. So up here in what I like to call the boring quadrant, we have things that matter a lot and people think about them a lot, like work. Exactly. Where down here, where people still think about it a lot, but it doesn't matter so much. This may be controversial, but I have coffee. I am really pleased to have gotten booze by my second slide. I feel like that's a good thing to aim for. Over in the next quadrant, I have aliens. Most people don't think about them a whole lot, and they don't matter, probably. And finally, we have bladders. I have filled this volume with a yellow fluid for visualization purposes. It is a very full bladder. Bladders expand as needed to accommodate the fluid. So pee is, after all, an essential part of people, so matters a lot. But most people do not think about it a whole lot, unless you're me. There are a couple of other things that can make you think about bladders a lot. So that's various neural disorders, including spinal cord injury, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis. Pregnancy can cause some nerve damage. Sometimes things happen and we just don't quite know why, which sucks. At any rate, the number one thing that people want back after spinal cord injury is number one. So as scientists, we wanted to know a little bit more about bladder dysfunction, how it works, what we can do about it. So if you find you're in trouble, that can come in a couple of different forms. We have, you can't store urine, that's incontinence, or you can't pee on command. So you might have either one of these, you might have both. These things are treated by, I had some very interesting Google image searches in the process of making this particular slide. If you can't store urine, you've got a lot of leakage, so you might be wearing diapers or pads. You might be having some drugs. None of them are the fun drugs. And if you can't pee on command, typically you would be using a catheter. If you have not ever used a catheter, that means that you need to sterilize a little tube and shove it up there. Those of you who just crossed your legs and cringed, you agree that we need much better bladder treatments than we have. So that brings me to a part of my talk I like to call catheter facts. Because I could win a very specific game of trivia. Those of you who are wondering why there's a picture of green onions on a slide about catheters, now have an opportunity to consider the fluid dynamics of the inside of a green onion. There is record of green onions being used as catheters in some cultures. There is also record of metal catheters uncovered at Pompeii, which is pretty cool. They lasted through a volcano. These newfangled catheters could never manage that. I did find out recently that because of COVID, metal catheters are coming back. There's a shortage of disposable catheters. So I think that that's great because everyone I know has a metal straw. Anyone who is thinking maybe a metal catheter sounds uncomfortable, Ben Franklin has your back, or your urethra. He is the inventor of the flexible rubber catheter, which is substantially more comfortable. I don't think the key was actually involved in the process of inventing this, but I do like to imagine that it was. So, back to bladders. My goal now is to make you way overthink the next time you pee. This is a bladder. It is not life-size. A typical bladder can hold about as much fluid as a can of soda, although there are, in certain cases of dysfunction, there are recorded instances of bladders being up to 2 liters, which is not great. So how this system works when it is working is you have the bladder, which is like a balloon, and you have the catheter, not the catheter, sorry. You have the urethra, which is like the neck of a balloon. These things need to stay coordinated, or else none of this is going to work super well. So if you squeeze those both, nothing is working great. If you relax them both, nothing's working great. Which brings me to the audience participation portion of my talk. If you squeeze your urethra and relax your bladder, you have continence. Keep those things coordinated. If you do the opposite, this concludes the audience participation portion of my talk. If you relax your urethra and squeeze your bladder, you can empty the bladder. This is also called voiding, as in voiding your warranty if you do this in the wrong place. So these two pieces have to work together if you want to effectively control your bladder. We all want bladder control. I have lied to you. So have your parents, so have your kindergarten teachers. No one can control their bladder. That's actually not how it works. You can only control your urethra. So the way that works is you have a happy little neuron that comes up from your urethra and goes up to the spinal cord. When you relax your urethra, it sends a message up the bladder to the spinal cord, bounces around, comes back down from the spinal cord, bonks into the bladder, and you have a full void, a nice bladder reflex. So that's the bladder reflex. That's how it works when it is working properly. If it is not working properly, and we want to activate these parts so that they will work together, we want to kick off the reflex. And there's an easy peasy way to do that. And that is by activating the bladder reflexes with electricity. No one ever sees the Ben Franklin callback coming. All right, so I think that Ben Franklin could have moved bladder research forward by about 200 years if he had been a little more creative. I think certainly would have been more fun to learn about in elementary school. But the key to activating these reflexes is to stimulate the neurons directly. So we can stimulate these neurons on a couple of different places. You could stimulate them down by the urethra, but it turns out that it's really hard to anchor electrodes around there. It's hard to get to the neuron in the first place. You can also stimulate them at the other end, which is right up by the spinal cord. So you can stimulate on the spinal cord end of the neuron, and the way that looks is like this. I showed this picture to a friend, and she said she thought it was a weird flute. So I'm doing great on my figures, I think. This is a spinal cord. This is actually a computational model of a spinal cord. So this is all neural tissue coming down the spinal cord. All those white things are little neurons coming in. This is what it looks like inside the bone, in case you want some context. But I am not a skeleton scientist. I am a neuroscientist, so I don't care about the bones. No bones about it. We're back to the spinal cord. Your spinal cord also does not come with rectangles built in, like the ones I have drawn an arrow to. Those little rows of rectangles are actually electrodes. So we put these electrodes on the spinal cord, and then we can stimulate through the electrodes, apply this electricity, and shockingly, make the bladder reflex go. So how does this look when we do it? Essentially, we're trying to make sort of a bladder terminator. Sometimes I think about, in movies, you have these humanoid robots. Like, did someone end up programming the whole waste disposal system for that? Like, were they handing out jobs? And Larry over there got, like, the laser eyeballs. And you get the bladder, and they won't even let you put lasers on it. Like, I think that a laser targeting system would be pretty useful, actually. Speaking of which, there's urinals over there if you need them. So we do not have lasers, but we did put these electrodes on and measure bladder pressure. So we're back to the bladder of a good talk. I'm going to be talking about graphs again. You can see bladder pressure, and so bladder pressure goes up a little bit in the background. That's just the bladder wobbling around doing its own thing. And then during this gray bar with the lightning bolt, we're stimulating. And during that bar, you see the bladder just come right up. Nice big bladder contraction, and you get whoosh. Normally it lasts about 21 seconds, an average pee, so needed to be physiologically accurate. So I said that there is to pee, and there is also not to pee, and we can also stimulate. Again, we have the bladder wobbling around in the background, and then during stimulation we're able to relax the bladder and restore continence with that same stimulation. One final pee fact that I want to give to you all is that one of the ancient Egyptian medicines for bladder problems was beer. So drink up. I think we have a lot of medicine in the house. I am not a doctor, so. Also, if you've been inspired by my talk, restrooms are by the stage here. And questions. And I said we would come back to the Middle Ages. What they learned is that they could refine pee to make phosphorus, and phosphorus glows. And they thought that that was proof of the soul. All right, yeah, any questions? Thank you.